Anemoia. This is a word doing the rounds, referring to a nostalgia for a time that never was. Not that the time has been obscured by the romanticising of it. This could easily be used to describe the noughties pop phenomenon being talked about a lot on social media right now, retrospectively dubbed indie sleaze. So what was indie sleaze? First of all, it was never known as that by the youths who populate the scene. It was coined in the press in 2008, but had slowly grown throughout the 2000s, having roots in the 2003 indie revival. To answer this question, we must go back to the turn of the millennium, when, for whatever reason, nu metal and UKG were the big sounds on mainstream radio. These were the sounds of Gen M and were characterised by spiky hairdos and baggy Blackstreet clothing. And bling. 2 years down the line, and both scenes had been destroyed by both backlash and abandonment by fans. Looking back, a lot of it amounted to the fact that both scenes were very diverse, not just ethnically, but musically and culturally. What we didn't bank on were the gatekeepers and purists who so vehemently rejected any kind of diversity in their scenes. It rather reminds of how 80s metal labels refused to sign any act which did not ditch non-white members due to them not fitting the image, and vice versa with rap. It is hard to believe such discrimination based on skin colour happening now, but that such an ugly reminder of the Jim Crow era lasted that long is sobering. Personally, that this purism ended nu metal just as it had begun strikes me as a missed opportunity to progress the heavy metal scene, bring it in line with more mainstream forms of popular music. Only a few years after this stamping out, the metal press began making concerned noises about the lack of diversity in the rock metal scene compared to other genres. Instead, publications like New Musical Express pushed various indie music acts, not because they were in any way new or groundbreaking, but for the opposite reason. They had spotted trends in predominantly white youths who had not yet developed any cultural post-millennium identity for themselves, and saw they were ripe for seducing with their brand of nostalgia, which spanned the 60s up to the mid-90s. This bizarre reasoning was that there was no more new, the good stuff, all belonged to the past. This negative outlook thus spawned the explosion in landfill indie music, a term of abuse for what topped the charts at the time. Derivative, shallow, vacuous, characterised by tuneless, tinny Fender guitars and drumming. And the culprits were all quick to move in and brand this pub music sound. All that was needed now was an it-girl figurehead to personify the look of the scene, and they found it. Discovered by American fashion photographer Mark Hunter, Cory Kennedy's famous shot of her slumped drunkenly on the steps of LA's El Rey Theatre made her famous online and in magazines almost overnight. She was indisputably the inspiration behind the casting of Kaya Scodelario and Skins, for she was also the spitting image of her. She was only 15 at the time. Her depression and substance abuse issues saw her easily exploited, and Mark Hunter caught his scandal by dating her for the rest of her teenage life, despite being in his 20s. At the time, I had as much contempt for the indie fashion scene as for the music, which was the reason for me buying my first DAB digital radio, so I could escape it for good and listen to what I preferred to hear. Yet it was a look which sucked you in. To fit in with my peers at university, I began wearing Vans. When my brolly broke, I rolled up carrying one with black and yellow kitten designs. But while hanging with the indie sleaze kids, I also hung with the emo crowd. Being autistic meant you could not be choosy with the company you kept. While it was the most in look at the time, it cannot be downplayed just how predominantly white it was. While non-whites could be found within it, they were a rarer sight. The black youth of my generation whom I found in the indie crowd tended, like the white kids, to be middle class and female, keen to find an identity not lashed to their ethnicity. I noticed how alienating for one very sweet mixed-race girl it was, yet against the odds she was able in the end to find ways to relate to her white majority peers. If there was one aspect from the nu metal which made its way in, it was the much-needed requirement to explore. For those looking for a sound to suit their interests in the 70s era, the prog revival was the place to go. Porcupine Tree, Blackfield, The Pineapple Thief all trod the line between trad prog and progressive metal, and while looking to seduce the Gen X dads, also took in the millennials, who were fast becoming disillusioned with the indie revival. So, how did it end? Most people assume indie sleaze, like most temporary scenes which do not stand up to the test of time, simply petered out. In fact, the catalyst for its decline was tragedy. Along with Russell Howard, who became its main face on the British stand-up circuit, Chris Marshall was also a popular personality, beloved of the indie crowd. He made his name playing the hapless Nick Harper in the naughty sitcom My Family, before leaving to create his own material. His roles reflected the dualism of millennials caught between wanting to contribute to society and wanting non-conformity. His solo projects also mirrored the absolute irony and postmodernism of the indie revival period that found merit with its audience. Sadly, his career ground to a halt when a near-fatal car accident left him permanently brain-damaged and unable to continue his comedy acting career. While Marshall's star fell ignominiously, he did survive. More devastating was the tragic end of journalist and style icon Peaches Geldof. The daughter of Boomtown Rats frontman Bob Geldof and TV personality Paulie Yates, Peaches' childhood was rife with tragedy and bereavement. She lost both her stepfather, Muggle Hutchins, and mother as a schoolgirl, and this saw her receive much public sympathy for her struggle to escape the so-called curse of the Geldofs, which involved dangerous drug abuse. She never recovered from the death of her mother, and while becoming Britain's answer to Kennedy, slipped into the same spiralling life choices as Yates. She became a hard drug user, even after becoming a mother. On 7th April 2014, Peaches' partner found her dead at home. She was 25. Her death rocked the world, especially the indie sleaze scene, which never recovered from the loss of one of its leading lights. Everything after was freefall. Skins ended the same year after a disastrous change of plot direction. Cory Kennedy slowly faded from the scene following her enrollment at boarding school in 2006. By 2016, indie sleaze was finished. Russell Howard was a lone survivor, and his show still plays on TV and streaming services today. So, the future of indie. Ultimately, indie sleaze was an aesthetic community, giving millennial youth a sense of belonging, but provided it celebrated the past, not the future. It was characterized by loose clothing from various periods and a desire to embrace the hedonism of previous youth tribes, hence the name. Yet hereby we encounter the issues with the associated dichotomy. In bringing the good times back, it also failed to address the less savoury aspects of those decades. The poverty, the racism, and the sexual exploitation of women, as well as the destructive side of drug culture, not only on individuals but on society. I, for one, did not mourn its passing. I could never gun for a movement dedicated to rose-tinted romanticism with no substance. Only now is press and the industry accepting the real indie music comes from ground up. True, lower, middle-class acts contributed to its origins and development, but it was predominantly working-class phenomenon. When you only had budget fenders and amps, you used what you could to showcase your talent. Hence why so much love is given to acts like Sam Fender, who I speak of in a previous video, and his stateside protege, Noah Kahan. These are legitimate indie acts who exude real, which leaves the question, where is popular music going? In the age of social media, the suggestion that pop is finally breathing its last is frequently raised. I do not believe this to be true. The current popular trend in music is the ambient songs inspired by ASMR and relaxation content. This will almost certainly evolve in some form or another, and I believe this will come to include an embrace of various easy-listening genres of the 40s and 50s. Pushing even further, I see the possibility of even more underground sounds previously missed. Celtic music shook up the world of music at the close of the 70s, but never grew popular. I can see that groundswell which embraced folk and metal, that is the pagan music scene, could well be the next to emerge. Even mainstream hip-hop acts like Lil Nas X or Rapaloopas flirt with Norse pagan and occult imagery in their music. This, without doubt, gives a taste of what is to come. The difference with this and indie sleaze, as it will be the fans who embrace what comes of their own accord, not the media of music's past.